Hi. For today, we will recap a sci-fi action film called Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The plot revolves around a chimpanzee who has been exposed to a drug that into a highly evolved monkey. Have you seen this movie yet? If not, grab some popcorn and relax. In the beginning of the movie, we are shown a jungle, where a gang of poachers kidnaps several chimpanzees for experimentation. We are then introduced to Genesis, a well-known biotech business that specializes in genetics. The company's biopharmaceutical scientist, Will Rodman, uses chimpanzees to test ALZ-112, a virus-based medication to cure Alzheimer's disease. After taking this medication, Bright Eyes, a female chimpanzee, solves an amazing puzzle in less than 20 turns. Will runs to see Jacobs, his supervisor, after seeing that his experiment worked. He highlights that he now has enough data to move the medication forward to human testing after working on it for almost 5 years. The news excites Jacob as well, so he lets Will submit his results for approval by the board. A day later, Will gives a talk about the ALZ-112 study he has been doing. According to him, the medication functions as a gene therapy, enabling the brain to produce new cells for self-healing. This appears to be a promising treatment for Alzheimer's. The emergence of innocuous green spots in the eyes is the sole adverse effect. The board members are reassured that they would get to see firsthand the extraordinary intellect of the chimpanzees they are studying. In another scene, an assistant visits Bright Eyes in her cage to get her ready, but all of a sudden, she assaults him and becomes hostile. Franklin, another caretaker, shows up at the location as a result of this. Then, with great caution, the two attempt to use a control pole to entice her out of the cage. Bright Eyes, however, becomes even angrier at this and escapes the prison. After that, she takes a wild dash around the building and smashes through the conference room's glass window. The board members are horrified to see her like this, but the poor ape gets shot and murdered before Will can say anything. As a result, Will's request to proceed with human testing is denied by the board of directors. Jacobs commands the euthanasia of all the chimps that remain because he thinks that Bright Eye's hostility was caused by the drug's adverse effects. Franklin begs the employer not to, saying that he is only concerned with business. Later on, Franklin brings Will a baby male chimpanzee that he discovered within Bright Eye's enclosure. They became aware of the fact that she was only defending her child as a result. Franklin wants Will to watch the young infant because he lacks the strength to put him down. When the infant gets home, Will presents him to his father, Charles. Soon after, they take a liking to him and call him Caesar. Then it is revealed that Charles has Alzheimer's disease and needs to be constantly watched upon. Will's desperation to discover a treatment for the illness is primarily due to him. Caesar unexpectedly takes his milk bottle and feeds himself in the kitchen the following day. This surprises both the father and the son because the monkey is only 2 days old. Later, Will makes the decision to work from home so that he can take care of his father and the little chimpanzee. Additionally, he starts remodeling the home to allow the primate to roam around freely. After several laborious days, a space filled with platforms, ropes, and climbing frames specifically for Caesar, he eventually starts to show some quite impressive intelligence. Will monitors his development on a regular basis while teaching him sign language. At 2 years old, Caesar can already complete problems meant for 8-year-olds with remarkable ease. He is more cognitively advanced than young people his age as he approaches 3. Given that Caesar's eyes also have the same green specks, Will surmises that Caesar received the ALZ-112 trait from his mother. Charles's Alzheimer's disease is getting worse, and every day that goes by, his health gets worse. Will takes several vials of the ALZ-112 medication from Genesis since he can't bear to see his father suffer. Then, in the hopes that it would lessen his father's pain, he gives him a dose. The following day, Charles is playing the piano flawlessly and seems to have gained newfound energy. Will is quite moved at the sight because his medication is finally working on humans. Caesar, meantime, becomes envious when he sees the nearby children having unstructured fun outside. He escapes through the window, but unfortunately, one of the girls notices him and shows signs of fear. Hunziker suddenly shows up and begins hitting Caesar with a baseball bat. All Caesar can do is cry out for help. However, Will shows up just in time to save him from suffering any major damage. After that, he brings Caesar to the zoo, where Caroline, the veterinarian, treats his wounds. Caesar uses sign language to communicate, and his brilliance astounds her. They both giggle as he even gestures for Will to take Caroline out to dinner. When Caroline pays them a visit the next day, she is pleased with the atmosphere Will has established. She does, however, tell him that Caesar will grow up to be a big, strong animal that may be dangerous. Then, wanting a change of scenery, she recommends taking him to an open space. Will thinks it's a good idea, so he takes them all to the redwood forest by car, over the Golden Gate Bridge. Caesar begins climbing on the trees as soon as they arrive, something he has never done before. He is having a great time, and the humans appear to be pleased with him as well. After 5 years, the scene changes to show Caesar as an adult chimpanzee who is beginning to wonder where he fits in the world. Will sees that Caesar is having trouble with something one day and approaches him about it as they are making their way back from the redwood forest. Will takes him to Jin Sis since the latter wants to know about his parentage. He then tells the truth, saying that Caesar's mother received a drug that increased her IQ and was then passed on to him. She tragically passed away from an accident, and Will took him in. Caesar is devastated by the revelation because he has been kept in the dark for all these years about his true roots. He is still distraught at his mother's death and his unclear identity the next day. He kindly corrects Charles when he sees that he is eating with the wrong side of the fork while enjoying breakfast. When Will notices this, he believes his father's illness is coming back. Later, after doing a few tests at Jin Sis, he finds that Charles's immune system has grown resistant to the medication ALZ-112 and has generated antibodies. Will is completely shocked to learn that his father is not going to have much longer. Meanwhile, Charles leaves the house and enters Hunziker's parked automobile. He attempts to drive while confused and unintentionally collides with other vehicles. Hunziker shows up angrily and yanks Charles away from the car after learning of this. Caesar becomes more aggressive as he watches everything from his window. He rushes out of the home and viciously strikes Hunziker when he can no longer stand to see the scene. When the poor guy tries to flee, Caesar chews off one of his fingers and knocks him down. Though it's too late, he quickly realizes what he's done because other neighbors have seen the incident. Following this, Caesar is brought to an ape sanctuary under the management of John Landon. Since Caesar has never left the house, Will is a little concerned, but John is confident that Caesar will do well in an environment of other chimpanzees. However, Charles's health keeps getting worse because his body rejects ALZ-112. Will visits Jacobs in a desperate attempt to find a cure, telling him of his father's experiment. He clarifies that while the medication may improve cognitive function, its benefits on the illness are transient. He has thereby altered the viral strain to increase its effectiveness and potency. The findings impress Jacob, who allows the institution to reopen for animal testing. Returning to the sanctuary, Caesar finds it difficult to adjust to his new surroundings. Dodge, the carer, also makes things difficult for him by torturing him non-stop. When Caesar is led out into the communal play area one day, he approaches the other apes with trepidation. But in an attempt to establish dominance, Rocket, the dominant ape, rips off his clothes before viciously attacking him. To test the upgraded ALZ-113, Jin Sis brings in additional apes from the sanctuary in the meantime. As the project's leader, Will selects Koba, a chimpanzee, as his initial subject. He brings the new prescription home to heal his father that evening after robbing the lab of it. Charles, however, declines the therapy and unfortunately dies while asleep. Caesar makes friends with Maurice, a female orangutan, in the refuge. Their shared knowledge of sign language causes them to get close very quickly. Dodge leads a group of pals to the cage area of the sanctuary later that evening. Caesar is teased by one of the friends, but becomes upset and grabs him by the throat. Then, before letting him go, he cunningly takes his pocket knife. Later, Caesar makes a little weapon out of the stolen knife. Then he lets himself out of his cage to join the group play area. He gains the trust of the enormous gorilla Buck after he releases him from his prison. Caesar's second plan involves luring Rocket into the shared play area where he is quickly taken out. Upon witnessing Buck and Caesar together, the arrogant ape instantly gives up and prostrates himself before Caesar, recognizing him as the sanctuary's new leader. As Franklin is doing tests, he unintentionally comes into contact with ALZ-113 and starts to have nosebleeds. While running to Will's house to alert him, he is unable to get through. Franklin unintentionally sneezes on Hunziker as he is leaving, spreading the infection. Caesar makes a note of the entrance's access code and uses it to leave the sanctuary. When he gets home, he discovers Will and Caroline sharing a bed. Nevertheless, he opens the refrigerator and takes out some ALZ-113 canisters rather than waking them up. Caesar then returns them to the sanctuary where he lets go of the gas in an attempt to raise all of the apes' level of intelligence. The apes are assembled for a debate the next day, but as soon as John arrives, they disperse. Except for Caesar, all of the apes return to their cages. Dodge pursues him in a common area and tries to use a stun gun to get him back inside. Still, Caesar yells, "No!" and knocks him out, pulling him into the cage area. After that, he rattles the other apes and lets them out of their cages. Another caretaker hears the disturbance and runs to help, but the apes attack him viciously. Caesar, however, stops his friends and, out of mercy, imprisons the guy. Instead, he approaches Dodge and sprays him with a fire hose. Dodge's stun pistol, regrettably, comes into touch with the water and electrocutes him to death. Following this, the enraged apes leave the sanctuary and head into the city. When Will arrives at the sanctuary the following morning, he discovers it to be completely destroyed. He finds empty ALZ-113 canisters in the cage sections and notices that all the apes have vanished. In the meantime, the wild apes split into two groups. Caesar leads the other group to attack Genesis, while Buck leads the first group to the zoo to free the imprisoned apes. When Jacobs arrives at Genesis, he is startled to find himself crowded by hundreds of apes. The other chimps that were brought in to serve as ALZ-113 test subjects have likewise been released. Fearful, Jacobs dials 911 and hastily boards a police helicopter to make his getaway. The two ape tribes eventually come together to form one enormous collective. The government sends in the army and elite officers, and they cause devastation throughout the city. Will runs to face Caesar, knowing that he is bringing the gang into the Redwood Forest. The Golden Gate Bridge, which links the city and the forest, is strongly guarded by police. They are to immediately put an end to the insane apes. Caesar, however, demonstrates his extraordinary intelligence once more by telling his friends to split off. To get around the barricade, one party climbs the suspension wires while others leaps from below the structure. While all of this is going on, Jacobs reveals Caesar to be the group's leader and gives the troops the order to murder him. However, Buck jumps into the air and blocks every shot right as they start shooting. Then, before he passes away from his wounds, he valiantly brings down the chopper. Jacobs finds himself hanging to the edge in desperation as the helicopter crashes to the ground. Koba begs Caesar for assistance, but the latter chooses to let him handle things on his own. The chopper is then forced off the bridge by Koba, sending Jacobs plunging into the sea below. The apes then proceed to re-enter their native habitat by entering the Redwood Forest. In some way, Will also makes it through the barricade and into the jungle. When he eventually finds his long-lost son, he begs him to return home. Caesar, who can now communicate like a person, responds, "I'm home," though. Will is shocked by this, but he also realizes that his favorite monkey is not interested in being confined to a house anymore. He thus grants Caesar permission to establish his own family in this woodland. The movie ends as Hunziker begins work as a pilot at San Francisco International Airport. He discovers that his nose is bleeding before getting on the plane, but he dismisses it quickly. The departure board shows a number of destinations as the movie ends, signaling the impending global spread of the ALZ-113 virus. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoy this movie. See you on our next video.